were quite a leader to be able to teach second grade. Tell us about your leadership skills that you had in the U.S. Army.
In the U.S. Army?
Uh-huh.
Well, I'll start this out by saying when I graduated from school, we didn't have the money, so I couldn't go on to high school. So I got me a job. And so I worked this job until it played out, which was 2 years. And I worked for St. John's Dairy. And what I was doing was taking the place of the guy that worked on the truck. And he had got called into the Army. And so I was taking his place. And so in 2 years he came back and he took his job. So that put me out of a job, so I started looking, and I don't think I'd ever been to Johnson City. No further than the circus ground, which was on the other side of the police station. And so that wasn't even getting downtown nowhere.
No, it wasn't.
And so anyway, from there, I went to work at Cole's Coffee Shop. I worked there a while, and business just was no good. I was I guess what you call a car hop. You'd run out to the car and take an order and run back in and get your order, or call it in, or whatever what you know.
Like Sonic.
But anyway...
Not like Starbucks. You weren't a barista, right?
No. So, but anyway, I was having a lot of fun anyway, doing it. I didn't have to cook or nothing like that. And so, but anyway, I liked the job, but then it finally played out. And I said, out of all the jobs that I had, I never quit a job. And I had a job that I built. Well, I went to carpenter school 4 years, and so I just needed 1 more year, and I'd have been a carpenter.
Yeah.
And so I had to go to Bristol to do that. And so I had got a job at Piedmont Dairy, and so I was working at Piedmont Dairy, and then I had to go to this union hall for a meeting twice a week. And that was usually, sometime it would run like 2 hours, sometimes just an hour. And, but anyway, a steel strike came up, and that closed the school, everything down. And I was doing good in that. I mean, even though I just had the 8th grade education, I could do just about anything I wanted to do. But when you're in the union, you go by what the main man says, not the boss. You go by what the union man says. And so I was down in the hole building the foundation for them.
Yeah.
They'd dig big holes down in the ground, and then you had to go down there and you had to build a form around it. And then you had to put, they had what they call a waver, and that was like a wire that you put through, and that helped the wood mostly together. And so they called me at dinner time one day and says, the boss did, was a job, he says, I want you up on the saw. And I said, on the saw? I says, man, you know I ain't supposed to be on the saw. And he says, I want you on the saw. And I said, well, if that's what you want. And I said, here I go, but you'll hear a whistle in a few minutes. And I went up there on the saw, and you know what? Guys, they'd bring their order like what they wanted. They would bring it up, and write it down on a piece of paper. Like they needed so many 2x4s cut at a certain length, or 2x6s, or ever what they was wanting, and I had to cut that. Of course, I had this great big huge saw, and it had everything. You just set it where it was at and put the stuff on, and it comes cuts it itself. You know, I mean, well, you have to put it on, but take it off. But without you misread, there ain't no way you can make mistakes. So, man, I was enjoying that. And but anyway, the union man, he come down there and said, "What are you doing on there?" I said, "My boss put me on here." He said, "You know you ain't supposed to be on there." I said, "I know it," and I told him that. But he told me, "You work at Saul." I said, "Okay, I work at Saul. Now what are you going to tell me?" He said, "Well, I ain't going to tell you nothing right yet. I'm going to
Talk to the boss.
talk to the boss." And so he goes and talks to the boss, and so both of them come back down there. And so both of them come up to me and started talking and asked, "You think you can handle that saw?" I said, "Well, I've been doing it. I can handle it." So anyway, I became the saw man. And so for the year or whatever what we worked, I was a saw man. And that's one of the main jobs, because everybody is coming and getting lumber. And so that kept me busy, and seemed like the day just flew by. And so, but then here come the steel strike. And that was right where we needed steel. I mean, we needed steel to put in the foundation and the forms and everything, you know. And so that just cut us off. Well, that put me out of work. Then I went around and around and around, and that's when I come down to Johnson City for the first time. And I went down one street, going in every store, and then come back up the other street, going in every store. Nobody wanted nobody, so I hitchhiked back home. And, well, I hitchhiked back to Elizabeth. And I went to the bus station and was standing there, and the National Guard had a building there, right straight across. And they were having a meeting, and they had fell out in the street, you know, and was going to march. And so they marched down to a field, and then they went through their exercise and stuff like that. And I said, "Well, hey, that'd be a pretty good job." So I went over there and went up the stairs, and I asked the man, I said, "How do you get in this?" He said, "Well, you join, that's all." He says, "Well, you want to join?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I want to join." I said, "Well, probably, I've got a lot of buddies that would probably join, because there ain't no work." And so he said, "Well, go back out and see how many you can get." Well, I went back out, and I probably got 15 or 16 guys. So here we all come back in, and we had one little guy. He wasn't too much bigger than this fellow here, but he was 18 or 19-year-old, see, but he just didn't grow up, you know. And he'd been shooting a BB, and what he'd done, he'd laid a ammunition down, and he'd get back here and he'd shoot at that ammunition, you know, the center.
Yeah.
Well, if he hit the center, that bullet would go off.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing to hold it. So actually, when he hit it, the bullet went somewhere, but the shell come right back and hit him in the head here.
Oh.
And so they figured that kind of damaged his
Brain.
brain. Well, anyway, he was in there. And so I got called over to the hospital, you know, and they wanted to know, and I told them about it, and he says, "How in the world could something like that happen?" And I said, Ask them, don't ask me. I just tell you what I know. But
Curiosity.
anyway, right off, I made squad leader. And so the squad leader, you had 4 squad leaders and a sergeant in a platoon.
What about, did you know what you were signing up for?
Did I know what I was signing up for?
Yeah.
Not really. I mean, I thought that was going to be a lot of fun.
Marching in the town square.
I seen them come out and they, you know, call attention and put that arm out and down and everything and all that stuff. And I said, man, now that's going to be a lot of fun.
So you and your buddies didn't know what you were getting into.
And so I didn't really know what was going on. But the next thing you know, I was in there. And my other 15 buddies was in there. And so then what we done, we set up camp down in Black Bottom. I mean, we took all the material that you're supposed to have, 60 pound on your back and all of that, and that rifle and all of that stuff. And here we marched down to Sandy Bottom. Oh, Black Bottom.
Black Bottom.
Well, Sandy Bottom, it's Black Bottom. And we got down there, and we set up tents and all of that, you know. 2-man tents is what we were setting up. And that's where we lived for the next 2 weeks, down there in that, you know. And, of course, we got a leaf around the end of it. We were going through training, so we didn't get as much as time off at that time, but it was interesting to me. It was a lot of fun. And then we crossed the river with a pack, 60-pound pack on.
How wide was the river and how deep?
Well, it's the Elizabethan River, so it's probably about 150, 200 feet wide. And so they said that this is where, back in the old times when they was having the Civil War, or what it was, that was the way they came. And they crossed the river about right where we did. And so we crossed the river and went on the other side, and then went back up, and then we crossed the river. And, you know, we got our weapons out, you know, and we were marching like we're supposed to, expect an enemy fire at any time. And so we got back across there and everything, and so time's drawing near, and so they come up one morning and says, strike tent. And so we had to take our tents and everything down, and so you took half of the tent, and your buddy took the other half, and that went on your pack too. That come down over your pack, you know, crossing and down, you know. And so we put that on there and everything, and they got us all together, and so we marched around the field a time or two, and they said, tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, you'll board the train. And it was up in Elizabethan, you know. And it says, you'll board the train, and we'll head for camp. So we didn't really know where we was going. But what we had to do, we had to go to every town in Tennessee, every city that had National Guard. And we picked up all National Guard. Now we started out like a short train, say about maybe 7 coaches or something like that. But every time we come to a town, we picked up another coach or two, every what it took to load those soldiers in. By the time that we got to Massachusetts, that was where the camp was. By the time we got there, we had a long train. Well, we had over 1,000 and some men, so we had a long train. And of course, this camp had been closed down